Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 161 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. Before we get started, as I write this, the unfortunate passing of Arlene Sorkin was just announced. As not only the original voice actor for Harley Quinn, but also the inspiration for the character herself, if it weren't for her, we would have missed out on a huge swath of entertaining shows and movies. Thank you for all that you did, Arlene. Condolences to all of her friends and family. Rest in peace.
I never knew that our romance had ended, and I thought it was a lark when you kicked me in the park. I never knew that you and I were finished, though I tried to be aloof. When you pushed me off the roof, feel our romance is dead.
We are nearing the end of August, so once again it's time for the monthly patron shoutout. Mike Sterling, Justin Bailey, Lily Breen, Jesse Clark, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Aaron Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Lyndon Onstead, Julio Herrera, and Matthew Saint. I am very grateful for your continued support. If you'd like to join in this club and get written scripts and extra audio in addition to this monthly shoutout, you can do so at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month. Speaking of my patrons, 2 of them wrote in after the last episode about comic book characters with autism or other neurodivergences. One to add some additional details, and one with a new question inspired by the topic. First, Mike Sterling, whose blog Progressive Ruin is always worth a read, had this to say. Hey Kurt, I listened to your episode about neurodivergent superheroes, and it got me to thinking. I think the X-Men character Legion, when introduced, was referred to as autistic, but at this late date I can't remember if it was in the comics themselves, or in promo or interview material from Amazing Heroes. Also, not really involving superheroes as such, but in the early issues of Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing, Swampy's friend Abby had a job working with autistic children. This would have been the mid-'80s, so possibly the earliest mention of autism in the comics? I don't know, but it's the earliest one I remember seeing. Keep up the good work on the podcast. Well, thanks, Mike. When researching autistic characters, I did also find reference to Legion being noted as autistic in his early appearances, but that was quickly ignored and the focus came on his other mental condition, which we'll be talking about a whole lot more this episode, which is why I saved him for later. In addition to hearing from Mike, I also got a message from Ricky Garvin, who said, quote, I really enjoyed the episode on neurodivergent superheroes and other characters. Now I'm wondering about comic book characters with mental illness, such as schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, OCD, or bipolar disorder. Do they exist? Oh, definitely. But there's one specific mental illness that I'm going to talk about this episode, because for such a rare disorder, there's a whole bunch of characters who have had it in one form or another. Let's talk Disassociative Identity Disorder. Originally known as Multiple Personality Disorder, or MPD, Dissociative Identity Disorder, or DID, is often confused with schizophrenia in pop culture. And while there are a couple of commonalities between the two conditions, current scientific belief is that DID is usually rooted in some sort of childhood trauma, and often coincides with post-traumatic stress disorder and other comorbidities like depression, anxiety, and/or sleep and eating disorders, while schizophrenia appears to have a much higher genetic component to it. With DID, there will exist 2 or more distinct identities, each with their own personality and memories. The group of identities, or alters, are often referred to as a system, with one acting as the host, which is the most commonly presenting identity, but not necessarily the original. Depending on the needs of the system, different identities will present under various circumstances, and over time, the host can even switch as one identity is needed more often. Thanks to Disassociated on YouTube and others for relating their first-hand experience. There are a few villains who have been stated to have DID, including Flash Rogue Dr. Alchemy, Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, Kirk Connors, the Lizard, Daredevil foe Typhoid Mary, and probably best known for his split personality, Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. But there's already enough negative association with mental disorders, so let's focus on the good guys. I'd be remiss if I left out Moon Knight from this discussion, with his 3 distinct alters, Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, and Jake Lockley. However, I've gone into quite a bit of detail regarding his system in episode 112, and continuing in the deep dive episodes on his TV show, episodes 114 through 119, with guest John Muhal. So rather than cover old ground, I'll just point you over there. One of the more recently created characters with DID is the Sentry, a Marvel character with Superman-like powers, introduced in a miniseries that presented him as a character that had existed for decades, but had somehow been forgotten by the Marvel Universe. Robert Reynolds gained, quote, the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, end quote, and became the Sentry. But his DID created an alter known as the Void, which was as evil as the Sentry was good. In order to prevent the Void from killing those he loved, Robert was able to make the entire world forget the existence of any of them until his reappearance, which was actually the character's first appearance in the comics. The two sides of the system have been shown fighting each other since his first issue, 2000's The Sentry #1 by Paul Jenkins, Rick Veitch, and Jay Lee, all the way until his death in the 2020 King in Black storyline. From a recent character, let's shift over to one of the oldest characters in the Marvel Universe. Although it took some time before he was officially diagnosed with DID, Bruce Banner is probably the best known character with the disorder. Like most DID sufferers, Bruce was abused as a child, and his father beat both Bruce and Bruce's mother. First seen in Incredible Hulk number 312, written by Bill Mantlo, with art by Mike Mignola and Jerry Tallock. This is when the disassociation began, but when exposed to the radiation of the gamma bomb, the alters were given physical form. When he was originally diagnosed by psychiatrist Leonard Sampson, there were 3 known alters: Bruce himself, the childlike Green Hulk, and the more mean-spirited Grey Hulk. Through hypnosis, Doc Sampson briefly united the personalities, which resulted in a Smart Hulk, later known as Professor Hulk in the comics. Stories after that introduced dozens of additional alters, which Professor Hulk was retconned to be one of. But the 3 originals are the ones that are still the most commonly shown. We've been over at Marvel for most of the time here, but DC has their own disassociative superhero, created by Grant Morrison and Richard Case, and recently played by Diane Guerrero in the Doom Patrol series on HBO Max, now just Max. The unfortunately named Crazy Jane has 64 alters in her system, the host of which is Jane. Born Kay Chalice, the young girl was abused repeatedly by her father, leading to her dissociative identity disorder. One of her alters, Miranda, suffers her own trauma, leading to further identities. During the invasion storyline, the alien dominators released a gene bomb, which led some people to gain superpowers. In Jane's case, each of the alters, except apparently Jane herself, has its own superhuman abilities. One can cast love spells, another has razor-sharp claws, another can teleport, and so on. In the comic, and TV show, we see these alters interact with one another in a mental construct referred to as the Underground, which looks like a subway grid, and each alter has their own station that reflects their abilities and attitude. Near the end of Grant Morrison's original run, which started as a main DC book but later moved to the Vertigo imprint, Jane faces her traumas by returning to her childhood home and is apparently cured. However, in later stories, it's revealed that her alters still exist, but she has since learned to healthily coexist with her system. Grant Morrison has stated that they created Crazy Jane while reading the autobiography of Truddy Chase, titled When a Rabbit Howls. If you're interested in reading a first-hand account of dealing with DID, that is apparently a good place to start. We'll end our discussion with the character that Mike brought up in his missive to me, and that is the son of Professor Charles Xavier, David Haller, aka Legion. Created by Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz, Legion's first full appearance is in New Mutants number 26, following a brief cameo at the end of the previous issue. As mentioned, David is the son of Charles Xavier, although David's mother, Gabrielle Haller, originally didn't tell Xavier about her pregnancy, and the two broke up before it became obvious. Later, David was home with his mother and stepfather when terrorists attacked, killing David's stepdad. This trauma is what first activated David's mutant abilities, and he burnt out the minds of the attackers, but not before his stepfather was killed. Being telepathically linked to so many people as they died rendered David catatonic. He was referred to as autistic in his first appearance, as Mike mentioned, but that was quickly abandoned as his DID became his defining trait. While originally there were only 4 alters seen, one of whom was actually the mental imprint of one of the terrorists that caused David's original trauma, David has since lived up to his code name by manifesting over 1,000 different personalities. At least according to the stories. We've only seen 60 or so on the page. Similar to Crazy Jane, each personality has its own mutant abilities. It's said that David's true power is to warp reality itself, but that each of his alters accesses a mere fraction of that. Legion is best known in the X-Men fandom as being the cause of the Age of Apocalypse story of the 1990s. After accidentally killing the precognitive mutant named Destiny, David saw visions of her where she told him that his own destiny was to achieve Professor X's dream, but alluded that the only way that could happen was if Magneto was dead. David used his abilities to go back in time and kill Magneto, aka Eric Lensher, as a young man. However, the point in time he chose was when Eric and Xavier were still close friends, and Xavier sacrificed himself in order to save Eric, causing the alternate future known as the Age of Apocalypse. This was eventually reversed by Bishop traveling in time to prevent it, and the psionic loop involved in stopping Legion seemed to have killed him. Eventually, as most comic book characters do, David returned and has mainly been an anti-hero of sorts, working for Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans, but doing so in a way that pits him against his father and the team of X-Men he leads. However, since the House of X storyline that led to mutants creating their own nation of Krakoa, David has actually been aligned with the X-Men, and has even reconciled with his father. David and his alters live in a mental construct known as the altar. That's altar as in place of prayer, rather than alter as in alternates. Other mutants can access this portion of the astral plane through a special gate on the island of Krakoa, and can go there to train, heal, or simply express their creativity in completely unique ways unavailable in the regular world. Unfortunately, it appears that the relatively peaceful time of Krakoa may be coming to an end in the comics, but hopefully this won't cause David to turn once again to his more violent ways, as it's good to see someone like him finally get a measure of peace. David was also seen in the TV series bearing his name, Legion, although in that series he was shown as schizophrenic rather than having dissociative identity disorder, once again conflating the two conditions. I hope you enjoyed that look at these various characters sharing a common disorder. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new topic, hopefully based on a question from one of you. Any suggestions you have can be emailed to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown, Twitter @geektownpodcast, Mastodon @welcome-to-geektown@mastodon.social, or Blue Sky @welcome-to-geektown.bluesky.social. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, why not become a patron at patreon.com/welcome-to-geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Ottstead. Theme music is by Aaron Lovitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material, their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.